there's a real danger in that kind of perception of God. And the danger is that as soon as something happens in your life that doesn't feel good, or that is a bit icky, or that feels like it's difficult to confront, then if you truly believe, or if the theology that we have is that God is this cookie jar God who just dishes out rewards for good stuff, that as soon as something goes wrong in your life, then you must have done something that really disappointed God. That really made God cross with you. And I don't know about you, but I think that theology is rife in our churches today. I think that is one of the main reasons why folks have fallen out of relationship with God, because they have felt that God's grace or God's love has been taken away from them when it's the most difficult times of our lives. And yet, the theology that I find from Scripture and from Jesus is that the God that we believe in is not a God who just promises us a rose garden from here on in, but a God who does promise to dwell in us and to be in every situation that we find ourselves in. And that the assurance of God is that this too shall pass, that ultimately there will be whatever, but that we shouldn't look for the rewards to confirm for us that God is still with us. But rather we should journey in this knowing that that we're in a relationship with God. And that the relationship, just as our human relationships, go through good and not so good experiences. And that is the God that we're promised to have with us and to be with us. You know, I've met so many people recently who have decided to become post-Christian. And by that, what I mean is that the God that they've heard about from the church is no longer the God that works for them in their life. It just doesn't work. The theology is old and it's moved, and it doesn't seem to jive anymore with their experience of God. And so they've become post-Christian to kind of separate themselves from this theology of this cookie jar God. This God that can only be with us if we are happy and joyful and feeling great. And perhaps my experience isn't your experience, and that's okay, but my experience is that my life's not like that all the time. You know, that my life does go through ups and downs, and, you know, I fall out with people and fall back in with people, and, you know, that life is not, whoops. Nearly went up in flames again. But that we don't, you know, that my relationship with God isn't like that. And I struggled when I meet with folks who tell me that their life is always like that. I struggle because I wonder, well, perhaps I'm not in as good a relationship with God then. But I think sometimes people put on a mask about what's really going on in their lives. And certainly as Christians we put on a face because we're expected to always be happy. We're expected to always have the big smile on our face. You know, we're expected to always present our lives as if everything is just wonderful. But I don't think it's true. And one of the things I really value about this grown-up God is that I get to tell the truth, is that I get to live the truth. And you know, whilst I appreciate that, you know, on a Sunday morning you don't want me to get up here and be all grumpy and you know, nasty and all the rest of it, but the reality is sometimes I have bad days. And the reality is that sometimes we all have bad days. But that doesn't mean that God's not with us. It doesn't mean that God's not journeying through these things. Is it from the Psalms? Remind me if I'm wrong. But doesn't the psalmist say, "Even though I travel through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for you are with me"? And sometimes there is stuff going on in our lives that just feels like you're traveling through the shadow of the valley of death. You know, it feels like, you know, I just want to give up. I'm tired of all this stuff. But the psalmist reminds us that even in the midst of despair, God is with us, journeying through those things. And those of you who are going to Bible study, you're studying Job right now. And if you've not read the book of Job, I really advise you to. But you know, Job reminds us over and over again. In fact, I can sum Job up by saying, you know, with friends like that, who needs enemies? You know? But the friends of Job keep telling Job that he must be doing something dramatically wrong for God to keep appearing to be punishing him. And Job just keeps coming back and saying, no, I know that God's with me. I know that this is a test. I know that this is a trial. I know that God is still with me in this. And ultimately, there's a happy ending to the story of Job. And I'll let you do that in Bible study because I don't want to take people away from Reverend Pat's experience on a Wednesday and say, well, we did it all in a sermon. But the reality is, the writer to the Hebrews says that's the kind of grown-up God you need. It's not the God that just feeds you milk. The God that you'll only worship if you're happy. That you'll only worship if everything is going right for you. I want you to know the God of Jesus. And the God of Jesus is a God who traveled with him. Not even in Jesus' life was everything wonderful. I mean, going to the cross was not exactly a wonderful experience. But he journeyed through that because he knew that he wasn't on his own. That there was an ultimate purpose. There was an ultimate goal. And I want to tell you, and those of you who know me really well, and some of you do, sometimes as a preacher you get to hide and when I say hide, I don't mean be secret, but I'm private about some things in my life. I try to share as much as I can from the authentic self, but those of you who know me really well, you know that there are trials and tribulations that you just have to muddle through sometimes. And just know that you're not abandoned, that there's still an ultimate purpose. And I want to tell you that in those most difficult times of life, that when you get through the other side, that's when you find the gift. That's when you find the blessing. And believe me, it's not nice going through it. But if you truly believe in an adult God, then that is the God who reminds you that even in the midst of despair, if you get through it, keep your eyes fixed on the one that you believe, there is something to learn. And there is something that will bless you. And there is a gift in all of this. But I want to tell you that means that we have to leave the milk behind. And we have to move to the solids. We have to have this grown-up image of God. And yet, how many of us are still living the image of God of perhaps our parents, or perhaps a brother or sister, or perhaps an image of God that's displayed by our pastors, and have not actually reconciled to the God of our own understanding, have actually reconciled a God of our own knowledge. You see, I think that's what moving from milk to solids is all about. Milk is about, the preacher gets up and talks about the love of God and the image of God, and we fall in love with that image. And that's our first step of entry into relationship with God, perhaps. But moving to solids means that we leave those images behind because we have an experience of God. And in the experience of God, we grow up in our faith. We grow up because of our experiences on the journey.